Well, good morning, good morning, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is AG the Dad, and this is Shit Talking with Sensible Chery. Today, we're going to talk about everything between A and Z because I just want to make sure I don't get any of the letters mixed up or messed up because I don't want to disrespect anybody. So, with that being said, let's just jump right in. Sensible Chery, what's the good word?
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Uh,
Well, I've been thinking over the last week or so, and I'd like to tackle what is identity?
mhm. Identity.
hmm
Um, I think it's something that the state requires you to give when you go to DMV. You give them a birth certificate that states what you are, and the government gives you an ID, and it shows uh, that you're a legal age to purchase cigarettes, purchase alcohol, vote, and die for this country if called upon. Is that what we're
So,
talking about?
not really.
Oh,
A little
my
deeper
bad.
than that. A little deeper than that.
Okay.
So, who decides identity? Is that, I mean, I think we're in a day and age where we can choose how we identify
Right.
and what identifies individuals.
You
So,
know, that is crazy. I understand what we're getting ready to get into, and it's a whole big can of worms. Um, I think Rodney King, his famous words after getting beat up is so much deeper. Think about it. Can't we all just get along?
mhm.
Why whose business is it? That's the problem I have. But go ahead. I probably put the cart before the horse, but go ahead. Let's continue what you were saying.
No, no, no. I think you're right. Why can't we all just get along? There's been something that's been on my heart for a while is the least common denominator. You learn that in math, and I would say that the least common denominator for us is being human.
Right.
And so if we get down to that level, that we are human, and stop trying to categorize and put in all of these separate labels, because so many of these labels, they cross over. And
Mhm.
so, what really is the purpose of having so many different labels unless they are to divide people? And
Right.
yet, we are supposed to be inclusive and accepting of people. And just because, accepting people does not necessarily mean agreeing with them. And
Absolutely.
that is something that we have gotten away from, that if you don't agree, at least that's my opinion. I could be wrong. I don't tell me what you're sensing, but it's as if you don't agree with what I'm doing, then you don't accept me. And I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I may not agree with something that someone is doing, but it doesn't mean that I don't accept them as a human being.
Um, I I think the problem with people, some people, not all people, because I like to say overall the human race is very civil, um, or we wouldn't have survived this long. Um, the people out there, um, I think that are not all, but some of the people that are in our government, I think they have control issues. And I think that once they get into a position of power, the the power may for some become intoxicating to the point that they think that their views are the only views. And I think people back in the day may have had the best intentions in heart when they created, all these laws and, you know, uh, constitutions and but they were left so not necessarily vague. They had uh, the foundation, but I think people have taken it to an extreme where they're trying to interpret it for their own agenda instead of understanding that it's we the people who are supposed to govern how our society is ran. And sometimes people say that their agenda is this, and once they're elected, their agenda becomes that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know. I just think that sometimes some of the people that we elect maybe shouldn't be in office as long as they are. Just like term limits. I think we have term limits for presidents because I think we realized in other countries that could very easily turn somebody into a dictator with that kind of power.
Absolutely.
So it's the same with our Congress. We have people in Congress that have no clue what our current um, generation is is into
Mm-hmm.
because they're so busy whining and dining and traveling beyond the means of real citizens. Real citizens aren't doing what our politicians are doing. Granted, some of them, a lot of them, are doing the right thing. But like I said, that power seems to be very intoxicating, and people are taking advantage of that.
Absolutely. And one of the key things that you said was intent. Um, we have a lot of interpretations of what the original intent was for some
Mhm,
things in history. And I recently had read something that was talking about one of the biggest things that's being used is language, and that we are constantly changing the language and definitions of things.
mhm,
For me to have made the comment that ruffled some feathers about boys not menstruating, historically, until definitions have been changed, that could be seen as a true statement. It wasn't until um, the definitions of being transgender and transitioning and that kind of stuff to come up that could potentially lead that to be something other than what its original intent was. Because I think hundreds and hundreds of years ago, if you would have said boys menstruate, nobody would have agreed with you.
mhm.
But now, when we have new definitions of what a boy is, that's where maybe we've got too many definitions going on. And so it's just like when I say boy, my intent is a biological male.
Right,
And so if somebody else does not have that intent, that boy means biological male, then it immediately causes a discrepancy in terms. And who's right? And without clarification, who's wrong? I mean, it's like that whole. I don't know if you've seen that meme or that image before that has the two people on two sides, and you have it's depending on which side you look at, it's either a 6 or a 9, and
mhm,
it's about perspective. And technically, both of them are right from where they are standing. And so, unless we start opening up the discussions and making it acceptable to have discussions why I see a 6, why you see a 9, and actually talk about it versus, oh my gosh, if you don't see my 6 and I don't see your 9, then you're wrong. You are
right.
wrong. You hate me. You don't like me. Like, where did that come from?
You know, I think it goes way back further. Um, I want to say around 1980, somewhere in that in the 80s. they stopped they slowly started taking corporal punishment away from parents. Um, and children started slowly becoming undisciplined. Um, I think that the generation that I grew up in, our parents were so involved in helping us raise our children that it was almost like they were raising their child and their child's child. And
Mhm.
they weren't allowing us as parents to be parents. And and it was a double-edged sword because you have our parents that want to be grandparents. And when we as parents see our children acting up and need to be disciplined, we want to discipline them, but our parents want to protect their grandchildren. So it's a double-edged sword where you're trying to teach them rules and discipline, and the parents are like, oh, no, 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 leave my grandbaby alone, he'll be fine, you know, because they've gotten softer as they got older. And we as our generation got complicit with being, well, we got comfortable with allowing our parents to, all right, well, you know what, I still want to go kick it. So we go kick it, and our parents are raising our kids, and then our kids have no respect for their parents. So why, if they don't even respect their own parents, what makes you think they're going to respect any adult?
Right.
Because the people that help create life in them, they don't even respect and honor. So you can kiss everything else and anybody else goodbye. I'm not saying that corporal punishment is the way. I'm just saying that the fact that they limited corporal punishment so much that people were getting going to jail, that people got scared to start doing that.
Mhm.
And kids got emboldened to the point where they could say, um, if you touch me again, I'm going to go to school and I'm going to tell on you.
Right.
And then you have to live in fear of that. So, yes, there are bad people out there that abuse children and stuff. But in the same token, we have to understand that disciplines, rules, regulations, all those things, they're necessities. If you
Mhm.
don't have them in place, I mean, what's going to happen with our society if are we going back to the wild wild west where it was lawlessness, where depending on what city you or what town you rolled up in, the laws change from city to city? I mean, if we get like that, it's going to be crazy,
Well, and we're already kind of getting like that by state. I mean, a lot of what you were talking about was undermining authority.
right?
And when that happens, um, there's going to be long-term consequences. You know, you talk about our kids and it's like what we want to protect them, but I think that you can put them in a bubble and protect them too much. I know with my son, like we used to have this stone wall in our backyard, and my son who's 10, and then I have a 31-year-old daughter, um, two very different children. And so with my 10-year-old son, um, he wanted to climb on the brick wall in the backyard. It was only like maybe a foot and a half off the ground. And my husband, being his first child, very protective. Like, he's going to fall. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. Don't let him do that. And I'm like, no, 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 no. I'm going to do this with him. I'm going to walk this wall with him back and forth because I know he's going to try to do it by himself because he was interested. It's one of those things, you see them gravitating towards things, they're going to do it. And so it's like, what can we teach them so that they start making better choices? And so for me, walking back and forth just next to him, not holding his hand even, so that if he slips, I can catch him. So that scrape he gets on his leg when he falls, and be like, see, that's why you have to be careful. Walking with them to help them understand consequences. That's the thing. I feel like some of these the wisdom that we have from our parents and grandparents and stuff like that, and as they get softer, they've gone through so much life experience, and I guess they've gotten to the point where there's some things that are not as significant. You know, you go through these extremes of the child that spills the milk. There's plenty of times that kids would get laid into for spilling milk on the floor or water on the floor, and the reality of it is that is not that big a deal. And when you start disciplining your children for simple, honest mistakes, as opposed to calmly, like, okay, you got to clean that up, that puts that fear in them where they're afraid to tell you things, afraid to come to you for, I mean, if they think that they're going to get their butts beat for spilling a drink on the floor, do you really think they're going to come to you when they're deciding to be a little bit more curious as they get older in school?
Mm-hmm.
And so we really need to think about this in a broader picture. And I think we've gone through so many different extremes where it's either way too much, like you know, the corporal punishment side. There's the difference between punishment and abuse. And at the level of abuse, that needs to be addressed. But on the flip side, zero consequences, like the timeout corner. I don't know how many people the timeout corner truly works for consistently, because at some point the timeout in the corner for a couple of minutes or counting, you know, 1 2 3 4 5 and nothing coming with it, it's like, oh, what, they count? Like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'll just sit here.
You know, you know what works really well, parents? Physical fitness as discipline. And I don't mean tell them to go outside and run around the block 1,000 times. You will be surprised how much squatting on the wall does. If you put your back up against that wall and you tell them to bend their knees at 90 degrees and hold your back up against that wall for 60 seconds, trust and believe that 60 seconds may or may not get made. And them legs get to shaking and they think about it. There's no abuse. And at the same time,
Mhm,
they're getting stronger, they're getting more physically fit. And my kids hated it. And it only took them a couple times to realize that I don't want to do that. So they were very cautious about doing things that were right and wrong. Um, do people can people abuse that? Yes. Do people abuse things? Yes. Um, do people over discipline? Absolutely. I
mhm,
think that, you know, parents, step parents included, sometimes when you have, just like when you have your own kids, like your situation, you have a child with your significant other and you have a child from a previous. Um, some people, I'm not saying you, but some people discipline the two children differently because,
mhm,
oh, this is my child. They're going to get a little bit more than that's your child. And oh, that's not your child. So I'm going to give that one less. What you have to understand is if you love your significant other, then you should love their child just like that child was your own. Because
mhm,
if you don't, when that other child grows up, they will resent you, maybe both of you. Um, Maybe that's what turns them to others to start thinking about wanting to be other things, other persons, or other mindsets because they see or feel. Step parents, I think, don't understand that, man, disciplining a certain way is abuse. You may or may not see it, may not understand it, but that child is at the end of the day still a child.
mhm,
Might not be your biological child, but if you're assuming the role of being their mother, father, then you need to help nurture them just like they're your own. If if I think a lot of these kids choosing to be the letters of the alphabet is because lack of love that there used to be in the family structure back when we were growing up. Actually, let's back that up. Even before our grandparents, that was the last generation of really true family, because our grandparents, think about it, our grandparents were together for half a century or longer in most cases. Now, society, we're lucky to be together for half a decade, married.
Well, that's
Where
that
does it,
pendulum. That
you know, go ahead.
that's that pendulum of from one extreme to the other. So you had generations of people that were staying together that hated each other. In some instances, not all. And so now it's just we are to the point where any little people don't stick it out. They don't try to make it work anymore. It's just like, well, I don't know, this isn't working for me, I'm out. And we have more and more children being born into these dynamics or not understanding, the full scope of the decisions that we make at younger ages. I laugh because at point I'm like, well, maybe because I was 38 when I had my son and I was 17 when I had my daughter. And it's like I go back, we talk about free will and stuff, but it's like maybe there should be an age limit on when you should have children. Because,
Hey,
from
absolutely. How can a
life
child have a
experience.
child? Yeah, how can a
uh,
child have a child?
right,
I
right.
mean, I'm not saying that if a child gets pregnant, there needs to be automatic abortion, because where is the rights of the unborn child? You
Right.
know, but man, you can't stop it. You're not going to be able to stop it because moral values are out the door. We don't talk
Mhm.
about moral values anymore.
Nope.
Back when our grandparents were growing up, they were in the church. Their parents, hey, we're church Sunday, let's go. And a lot of that probably had to do with the fact there wasn't nothing to do. We didn't have the technology that we have. But now we're moving so fast um, in life that we're not taking time out to smell the roses. We're just zooming through life because we're trying to get there. Because, one of my friends said something to me that made me go, wow, that's true. My son has just got to the age where he's working. He's still in school, but he wanted to get a job, and he's gotten a taste of getting paid, earning income. And he said, man, now that your son knows how to make money, that it really exists, that's probably the biggest drug in the world, money. Because without it, it's hard to survive. Not saying you can't survive without money, because you can. People do it all the time. Um, if you want to live off the grid. But um, once you get a taste of money, that changes everything. And when you have a whole lot of money, that's when your views can be pushed upon other people. If I'm a filthy rich person and I want my world around me to be a certain way, and nobody can afford to stop what I'm doing, I can build my society however I want.
Hmm.
And I think that's where we're getting at. You got all these people, the 2% that have all the money, are trying to create life according to their agenda. And I think they're doing things I mean, actually, they're really smart about it. If you keep, like I said before, if you keep everybody poor and only the rich who know how to stay rich, the rich don't have to do nothing. The poor are definitely going to have to keep fighting to get wherever they're going to get. It's like the crab in a barrel mentality. You put a bunch of crabs in the barrel, they're all going to step on each other, but nobody's going to get to the top. Only the people at the top of the barrel that have already that grew with the barrel. They were at the bottom of the barrel when the barrel was starting to get built and it was going up, but they held on to the top and looked at everybody going, oh well, yeah, my I mean, if you want to call it my plantation, made me a lot of money, and now all of y'all, hey, y'all on your own.
Yeah, and see, that's where we've been brainwashed within reason. Because I think, like you're saying with this barrel, that barrel exists, but it is not all there is. And
Right.
so, the crabs that are stuck in that barrel, how did they get stuck in that barrel? And they don't realize what's outside of the barrel.
Mm-hmm.
For those that are, who told anybody, oh, you can't do that? I just had, it's like, what prevents you from doing anything that you want to do?
Right.
It's fear. Fears usually gets in the way. You can say that money, well, I don't have the money to do this, but if you have a purpose and you have a passion and you stick to it and you focus on it, there is nothing that you can't do. There's nothing you can't have. Your own barrier is your mind.
Right.
And who put those walls up in your mind that, oh, you can't do that? People are working in jobs that they can't stand. Um, and like you said, it's about the money. It's just, we have to get to a point where we realize, find what you're passionate about, find what you enjoy. This goes back to like with school and stuff. I'm like, how come we don't do aptitude tests for our kids at an earlier age? Let's expose them to all of the things that this life offers at a very young age to see what they naturally gravitate towards.
Mm-hmm.
um, we don't do that anymore. We've pulled so many things out of the school. They used to have home economics and, art and music. And we were fortunate in our school to just have band back this last couple of years. But before that had been even PE. They don't even take showers in school anymore. At
Mm-hmm.
least at the elementary, it's like I remember you do PE class and then you take a shower. None of that. It's
There's
it's
not enough time
right,
for you to take showers, and then also, I mean, I don't necessarily want my child butt naked at school, because it in our society, and it's sad to say, in our society, there's too much room for bad things to happen.
right.
At in the K through, man, even up to K through 8, because I think an eighth grader still at 13 still doesn't have the mentality to keep up with an adult who has a corrupt agenda. So
Mhm.
I'm thinking that, maybe in high school, yeah, but even then, now you're talking about boys and girls who are in puberty that are curious about their bodies and now maybe have a look up to authority uh, fetish, and want to sleep with their teacher. Now you
Mhm.
now you open up a whole nother can of worms. So yes, people, they're gonna stink at school, but yeah, man, it's such a gray area. um, we're not venting our teachers, I think, enough, and also we're making life for them to be a teacher hard. There's too many rules, regulations, boundaries, lack of pay to put up with the things that they have. Just like what created this whole podcast, um, the money waste and directed in the wrong direction. Some of the money that I think our school board or schools use, school system, they're just throwing it away when we could
Mhm.
put that towards making our schools safer, making our teachers have more programs. When we graduated from school, I want to say right before I graduated from school, they just started pulling all those trade school activities that you had in high school, like you were talking about economics. I mean, if you don't know how to cook for yourself, especially nowadays when it takes two incomes to run a household because the cost of living is so high, no one's at home to teach these kids how to cook. So at school, at least give them the bare necessities. This is how you
Mhm.
cook, shop class, give them the bare necessities. Most of these kids don't even know how to change a tire.
Mhm.
How can we ask them to go to work if they don't even know how to change a tire? If they catch a flat, they got to spend money to change a tire instead of fixing it themselves. That's insane.
Yeah.
Why keep handicapping our children and taking away? I mean, in California, and I'm not sure if it's the same in Oregon or anywhere else, but the lottery was created so that um, they were supposed to give some money to the school system, and it was supposed to enhance what the school system has. But as soon as the money came to the school system, they started taking away the allotted money to the schools. Now they don't have an excess where they can actually do more for our
Hmm.
children. Now they have even less because if the
Right.
lottery doesn't do well that particular month, our school system has less. That's wrong. It's
Yeah.
like
No,
it's the pocket.
we have a lot. I know PERS was a big hot topic too, because a majority of the funding goes towards the retirement plans of our educators. It was Oregon had a horrible system in place to get to the point that we're in, but now we're still dealing with the consequences of that. And so when we do have the additional money for lottery and stuff like that, you know, that was my big issue with this Menstrual Dignity Act, and that they carved out, $5.5 million away from our state school fund to go towards putting menstrual products in all of the bathrooms. And it's actually gotten me to the point where I'm thinking deeper than that. There's a lot of carve outs. I was looking at our state budget just for all of the schools in Oregon as a whole, and the free lunch program. So I started thinking, it's just like that comes out of the state school fund for education. This Menstrual Dignity Act comes out of the school fund. There's other services for special education and stuff that actually make sense. But like free lunch, I have a question. How come the
Okay.
money for that? How come the money for that doesn't come out of the same money for the EBT and food stamp cards? Why, if it's for food, not education, why can't the funding for that for our students come out of the same pool of money that is intended for it, as opposed to the state school fund, which is meant for education? Same thing for menstrual dignity. Like we have OHP, the Oregon Health Plan. Why isn't the money for menstrual products coming out of the OHP pool of money for our students versus coming out of the state school fund for education?
The the short answer is I don't know.
Ask better questions.
you
That's
know,
that's that's my motto. Ask better questions. Somebody
right.
please answer that question for me.
You
I
know,
mean,
I I can agree. When I was gonna cut you off about the free lunch program, I was like, I think that the free lunch is very important
mhm,
because, like I said before, um, a lot of us who may have more than others, uh, we may have blinders up because we're oblivious to the point that maybe there are people out there who go to school just so that they can eat.
right. And don't
Uh,
get me wrong there. Like, I totally understand the need. I absolutely believe in it. I see it, but it comes down to accountability.
right. I
I
mean, yeah. Once you wait, hold on. Once you said what you said about why doesn't it come out this fun, that fun, that's when it made sense to me. And I was like, oh, you know what? That's why I was like, I don't know. That makes perfect sense because that's why these services have been created
Mhm,
to help those that are less fortunate. And the fact that they're not being allocated, and maybe it's the fact that you're on the school board um, is part of the thing that you could be like, hey, how come we're not petitioning our state to allocate funds for that? Open up discussion.
right.
Um, but I want to get back to the alphabet.
Okay.
You know, what because we spent 40 minutes talking about everything else but the ABCs today. The, you know, the the feminine hygiene thing for me, boys will never have menstrual cycles. You were born a boy, you have boy parts. Um, I think the way that we could nullify all this and make it easy is if you're not able to bear a child um, from scratch, you don't need feminine hygiene products. When you're at that age that you can do that, then you should be allotted that opportunity to have that in school if need be. But I don't think also that it's the school's responsibility to provide them to every single, because you know what happens, um, girl, I ain't got no feminine hygiene products. Go to school tomorrow and just go take the whole box.
Mm-hmm.
Now we good. Now when we come in there, you got another kid who's like, oh, I ain't got none. No, leave that with the nurse for, oh, you just started, it's your first time, here's your welcome starter kit. Sorry, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. Here you go. um but if it's, now we're paying for it, no disrespect to women, but at some point the parents have to take responsibility for that, or make a fund for children, because it comes down to, well, some people can't afford them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I get it. Yeah. So now allocate some funding for that, but leave them in the control of, like, the nurse. Not
Mm-hmm.
to say that the nurse needs uh more responsibilities, but we all know that there is times when the school nurse doubles as the secretary or whatever, because she's not needed most of the day.
Yeah, but what you need to realize is we don't even have school nurses in every school anymore because we don't have the funds for school nurses in schools. Our school doesn't have a school nurse in it. Some of the upper grades have access, but our school doesn't. Those are positions that have gone by the wayside.
Wow.
And that's part of this whole accountability thing. There should be a nurse in schools. And I
Mm.
know, some of the comments that came from former nurses that had been in schools was, that was a key time to build a relationship with students and give them an understanding of menstruation and stuff like that, and that it is natural and questions and concerns that come up. How are we educating people by just putting products with no explanation, just available to everybody? Here, read the instructions. Like I said before, K through 2 can't read, so look at the images and do what you will with them, not even understanding what they're meant for. That is not education. And
Mm.
that's what frustrates me, is that we have got to get back to basics. So when we talk about all of these funds that are being carved out from our education system, taking away from education, when we are failing our students, they are not reading and writing, they're failing in math, and you want to take money out of education to go towards other things when you haven't even mastered the intent of what that money was for.
It's crazy. When we were growing up, it seemed like everything was working. Uh, I knew how to read the Constitution because I knew how to read cursive. Um, and now all those programs and all those little um, study guides, material are gone. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, how can how can America call themselves a society when we have a whole generation that doesn't even know how to read our Constitution?
Mm-hmm.
It looks like foreign language to them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I I remember putting a book that was written in cursive, in front of some I think they were like fifth graders, and I said, "Hey, read this," and they looked at it. They were like, "What is that?" I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they looked like certain letters, because some of cursive is looks like what it is, but they didn't have a clue.
Mm-hmm.
So how can there be law uh, if a whole generation don't even know how to read the laws?
Right.
I mean, the laws is what we social media has been our new rules and regulations. But the
Mhm.
problem with it is people are believing everything that they see on social media,
Mhm.
and a lot of it is a bunch of untruths.
It's a lot of opinion. I mean, we all have
Yes.
opinions. We all have bias,
Hmm.
and somewhere in there is the truth. And just because I believe something doesn't necessarily make it true. And just because I change definitions of things or add new words to describe things, that was one of the things I was looking at was there's the glossary of definitions, um, for things like asexual being out there, so often called ACE for short. Sexual refers to complete or partial lack of sexual attraction or lack of interest in sexual activity with others. Asexuality exists on a spectrum, and asexual people may experience no little or conditional sexual attraction. To me, it's like we start putting all these words out there that's part of the LGBTQ community. That's being human. You may not be attracted to somebody. That's normal. Like there's so many normal things. And then there's the idea of those things that actually have to do with sexuality, bisexual, being gay, lesbian, same gender loving. They're like adding all of these additional layers of descriptions. And so many of them are basic, male, female. You're either attracted to a male or a female or the same sex or what have you. But they're using multiple ways of explaining that, where some of it is you know what? As a female, if I like hanging out with female friends, that doesn't have to be anything more than that. It doesn't have to put me in a special category to that I have to be divided from anybody else. The bottom line is it comes down to the sexual side, which we've discussed before. At what point I shouldn't be worried about in school what is underneath your clothes and what you're doing with what is underneath your clothes. When we start going into that, that's where we have more issues, because I shouldn't be telling anybody what they're doing with what's under their clothes when we're dealing with our children. And the parents need to have a lot of involvement when it comes to what is going on with their children and under their clothes. So now we're getting to the point, like I said, in the state, when you have puberty blockers and you're able to start doing sex reassignment surgery at the age of 15 years old, you are not an adult yet. And when you start changing things under your clothes, parents should have every right to be involved. And they're getting to the point where our Oregon Department of Education is starting to make statements like, well, it may not be acceptable at home, so figure out how to accommodate these students during school without necessarily having that information go home. Hold on, that is wrong. Like, there's one thing that most of our educators and people involved in the school, they are mandatory reporters. So here's the deal. There's a difference between uncomfortable and abuse. And if a child is going to be abused when they go home for something that they are dealing with, then that should be reported. But if it's just going to be an uncomfortable conversation with their parents because their parents may believe one thing, have raised them to believe something, and now they're getting information telling them something different, that needs to be on the table. And all sides needs to be discussed. You know, they keep talking about, the idea of, well, let them identify as they want. Um, our brains are not developed until our mid 20s or later. So how can you tell me that our children have the ability to make these decisions? And that's where the adults come into play, that are supposed to be guiding them, not harming them, not putting them in harm's way, where you are letting children decide who at any given whim want to be something one day versus something the next day. That's where that guidance is supposed to come into play. When they're older, totally different subject.
Well,
And
we all know that children will say something today and really mean it tomorrow and every day after that for the
right,
rest of their life. Because
right.
I know that my 12-year-old, um, if they want to be a superhero today, I'm not going to take them down to this your neighborhood science store and inject them with a bunch of nuclear radiation in hopes that they become a superhero because they think that's what they want to do. I mean, we have to have some common sense. The fact that schools now, true story. I know that I think I even talked about this the last time. Um, but during, teacher orientation, when you go get to meet the teachers, they were talking about their curriculum for that particular class, and they said, "Yeah, we're going to talk about sex ed." And then after they talked, they said, "Anybody have any questions?" I raised my hand and I said, "Yeah, are we going to talk about homosexuality?" And they said, "Absolutely, we're going to be discussing that and all the letters of the alphabet." And I said, "I have a problem with that." And they were like, "Why?" I said, "Because I don't feel that it's your place to educate my child on what you feel is acceptable for what it is." Now, I'm not homophobic, but I'm not homosexual. And I will say that I would rather my child learn these things on his own, not saying that they should be oblivious to other people, but just like you said, in K through, at very minimum, K through 6, 7, why are we even discussing sex at school with them? Because if that's an issue, then obviously that those children are being exposed to some things in their own home that doesn't need to be brought to school.
Right.
So maybe we should. I'm not saying we should shut it down, but school isn't necessarily the place for that. I remember going to school. Um, I want to say in elementary, junior high, and if the principal saw two kids holding hands, he would say, we ain't got none of that's going on because you're here to be educated, not to find a place to be socializing to figure out whether or not you guys are high school sweethearts or not."
They're putting more of a divide to, like you said, homophobia when I look at the definitions of the glossary that they have. So both homophobia and biphobia are listed, and there's something very specific that they state. So the fear and hatred of or discomfort with people who love and are sexually attracted to either the same sex or more than one gender. That statement seems very simple, but when we talk about like phobias, phobia is fear.
Mhm.
And fear and hatred, I can
Are two different.
absolutely relate to. But now we've added discomfort with. That's a little grayer because
Mhm.
I may not be comfortable with something, but it doesn't mean that I have a fear or hatred of it. It may not be comfortable for me, but you are now adding that verbiage in descriptions of things that you are, you know, putting out into society that, oh no, 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 no. You are phobic if this fear and hatred is what's first and foremost. But even if you're discomfort, if there's a little bit of discomfort, then you are homophobic or biphobic. That is wrong. That is extreme. It's like we keep adding layers. So it's just like we have got to learn to get uncomfortable. We are to a point where life is not easy, life is not fair, life is not comfortable. And so when we start telling people, oh, if it's not easy, if it's uncomfortable, then putting them in some kind of isolation or that they're different and that shouldn't be this, people just need to accept you. No, you need to be able to talk about it, because by not talking about it is where we end up with children that are confused. And that's the side of it where I have had plenty of conversation with people that are having conversations with children and students that are on the other side of this, that aren't necessarily confused with their gender, or they believe the gender that they were born with is the gender they should be, something along that lines. And now they're feeling like that it's not okay for them to feel that way,
Right.
that they're wrong. We are now, it's like I feel like there's this whole reverse discrimination going on for so many things. Like, it's just like we've had discrimination in people of color, and now it's just like we're getting to the point where, oh my gosh, you are a white supremacist, your white privilege. That's discriminatory as well. So, in order to make some people not feel discriminated against, does that mean that we start going to the extreme of discriminating against whoever they felt they were discriminated by? This is ridiculous.
You know, you're right. It should be okay for people to be uncomfortable to a certain extent, um, because in public you have a choice whether or not you want to be someplace or not. Now, with that also being said, um, I'll use a an amusement park. I don't think that we need and I hope I'm not offending anybody by saying this. We don't need a whole gay section where, um, like we don't need gay superheroes. We don't need all that. Sexual orientation does not have to be put into our our children's role models. Um, just their good deeds. Why do we have to add their sexual orientation into all the good, positive deeds that they're doing? What does that have to do with anything? Just like you said, if we're educating, we don't need to teach people how to have sex. That's natural. Procreation isn't something that we had to teach. Everybody was a virgin when they're born. And at some point in time in their life, they've learned that this is what happens when you have sex. Um, so I don't feel that we need to educate them on that part of it, but maybe letting them be aware of things that can come of having sex, diseases, childbirth, um, things like that.
Mhm.
But all this other stuff where we're in there and saying, oh, boys, it's okay for boys to touch boys and girls to touch girls. I mean, it's a double-edged sword for men, because we all have the fantasy. I'm not gonna say we all, but a lot of men have the fantasy of, oh, I would love to see two girls together, man. Me plus two girls. Oh, this is great. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, on the flip side of that, why isn't it okay for a woman to say, shit, I want to see two guys, shit, me and two guys, and not in the same aspect as what we might think, because everybody has their own individualism about it, but that's none of our business. That's why the
Right.
porn industry was created. You want why is it you have to be 18 to watch porn, but you only have to be in school to be educated about sex
Right.
and sexual orientation and and the intricacy of sexual intercourse? What's the difference? Shouldn't they be 18? We're talking sex.
Hmm.
Should there be at least 16? I mean,
Right.
where does the birds and the bees talk? Where did that responsibility end with parents and begin with school? When
Right.
when was that okay? Because back to the thing I was saying, I told the teacher, I'm not comfortable with you guys teaching my son all this, because I'm not okay with that. That doesn't go along with my views, nor does my son even want to be uh, gay, homosexual, whatever you want to call it. So why not be able to opt out of it, you
Mm-hmm.
know, being forced to have it because I said, well, what happens if I decide I want to take my son out of this portion of the curriculum because I don't agree with it? And they said, well, then he'll get an F. Whoa, whoa, wait. My son is a straight A student. Now he gets an F because you want to teach him something that I don't agree with. And I'm sure that I'm not the only parent that disagrees with what the curriculum that you guys are teaching. So that's why it does come to parents speak up. Your
Mm-hmm.
rights are being taken every single day, and it's chalked up to this is the norm. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I watch a lot of these stand up for your rights kind of things where the people are violating your rights.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that is true. Um, you're allowed to videotape in public, but they will try to shut you down because they know that if they control the evidence, then the truth can might not ever get told.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, my belief is if I could see a camera recording me, that means it ain't private. It's public because
Mm-hmm.
somebody other than me has control over that. So if you put up no cameras allowed here, but I see a camera videotaping me, why can't I pull out my camera and start videotaping what's going on? Because we know how hard it is. No disrespect. Hey, I'm not police bashing by no means by this statement, but we all know how hard it is to get the police footage in any situation. You have to request it. You have to go through all these bells and whistles and hoops to get it. When if I just turn my phone on and start recording, I have my own proof and I can see exactly what happened and I can reevaluate. But the point I got, we're getting way off track, but it's we're not having, just like you said, ownership.
Mm-hmm.
Ownership of you know, what you did, your responsibilities. You're responsible for your actions.
Mm-hmm.
But our kids don't need to be educated on sexual orientation in K through 6. I don't even think they need to be educated on that in 7th. 8th grade, man, maybe we could start just like I said discussing the sex can give you venereal diseases.
But see, this is just it. This is a discussion that should be had. These decisions shouldn't be made just by the government. They shouldn't be made just by these agencies. It needs to be a conversation with where education is at by the state and where parents are at. And there has to be, and together come to a decision as to what is appropriate. And then you can make choices after that. If you want to pull your child out of school, I mean, school choice is becoming huge. Sure, we'll talk about that in a future um, story. But yeah, I mean, it just needs to get to the point where we are having these conversations and not just being directed from one side.
Right. You know, it's just look, we're starting, not us, but the government seems like that they're getting more and more involved in wanting to tell his story opposed to history.
Right.
You know, we can't we can't hide history, but we can change it.
Yeah.
You know, it's been done all the time because I'm sure
Hmm.
that the Bible, as we know it, isn't the same Bible that was created by the people who at 0 BC,
Right.
um, or 0 AD. Um, so for me, everybody wanting to run everybody's life, man, sometimes we need to sit back and mind your own effing business to a certain extent. When it comes to harming our children, yeah, I get it. Speak. They need advocates. They need advocates everywhere. You know,
Hmm.
nobody's perfect. I'm sure we've all done things that we probably look back on and go, damn, what the was I thinking?
Hmm.
Uh, you know, and it doesn't mean that people can't change and people can't wake up and smell the coffee.
Right.
Um, the LGBTQ community, I understand what their the reason for doing what they do is, because there needs to be more awareness. But they also need to have responsibility of understanding at what age
Hmm.
do people truly are they just following a fad because the kids that they hang out with in school, maybe it's one kid. I'm not going to say he's confused. He was born different. And it
Hmm.
truly is the way it is. But that one child can be so influential on other children around them because we all want to hang out with the popular kid
Hmm.
until you're rejected and then you become that outcast and now everybody looks at it like, ha, look at them, those are the nerds or whatever, right? So everybody wants to be around that popular kid, but this popular kid decides that they want to identify as whatever, okay? And now these kids that are growing up with them decide, you know what, he's cool, so I want to hang out with them. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but the fact that kids can be influenced and then you add teachers reinforcing it,
Hmm.
these kids start becoming confused about truly what their orientation is. And when they and may try something, and then when they get older, look back on it and go, I don't know what I was thinking. Now
Right.
that I'm older and more mature, I can make those decisions. I'm not saying that there are not people out there that do truly feel and think that way. Um, but just like you said, why is sex even talked about in our school system?
Hmm.
That's crazy. I mean, to the extreme that they
Right.
talk about it. I mean,
Right.
yes, I think that I mean it's part of life, and it's when we grew up, we were taught sex ed, little bit, and they used the birds and the bees analogies when we watched it, and we got the gist of it. That's all
Hmm.
we needed. They let our imaginations develop the way our imaginations should develop, and you know are there people out there that are wrong or bully or whatever? Absolutely, there's some people out there because their parents put it in them. Oh, anybody like that, I'll beat their butts.
Right.
um so when they get old, when they're in school, they're like, look at that, I'm gonna beat his ass.
Hmm.
Now that's wrong.
Hmm.
Address the bullies, the people who are, because somebody's a little bit different, address those. That's something that needs more attention than the other. And I don't know, just like I said, but with the 5 minute feminine hygiene, give it to the office then, so
Hmm.
we can regulate how much is going out and they're not just shoving it in their noses in sixth grade, fifth grade, fourth grade, third grade. Ha, I got stringy boogies. Ha, no, eh, we won't have to waste as much. The budget
Right.
doesn't have to be as grand. It can go towards different programs. I'm sure that if we invested, 50 grand uh, into certain things every year, certain programs, it would eventually grow into every school. And the 5.5 million that you guys are using up there on feminine hygiene can go towards something that's going to actually help our children grow.
Right.
I don't know. But we do need to address this LGBT thing that you want to talk about. So, hey, I'm going to give you the floor for about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and address it.
Well, I think we need to get down to the why. There's so many different descriptions, and I know we're running out of time today, so we'll probably have to revisit this because like I said, I started looking at through some of the descriptions and stuff, and um, you really could get to the least common denominator. And the reality of it is we are human. We should accept one another as individuals, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to accept for ourselves the choices that others make. And so that doesn't mean that just because I don't agree with some choices that someone else makes because I don't want them for me, it doesn't mean that I can't accept the fact that you are free to make those individual choices for yourself. And as long as those individual choices are not causing harm to others, then they should be your choices to make. But when it comes to our children, we are getting to a very fine line where personal choices could end up harming our children in the future when they do not understand the full implications for the maturity level of their brains right now as they get older. And so, when we talk about people that have a fear or hatred or discomfort, I have a fear that we would put any child in a position to change who they are based on something that they feel at a given point in time that could then change later. And so, yes, do I have a fear that we have children that will progress to transition into something and then later detransition? Yes, I do. And I think we should be very careful about influencing our children in such a way. And so that's the discussion that I think we should all be having deeper, is to just make sure that we know our whys and make sure that we are not influencing children to make decisions that they're just curious. They're gonna, there are so many things that we're experiencing between hormone levels, life experiences that we're just going to go through, and we have no idea how we're feeling in any given moment. That to start saying, oh, at this moment in time, this is a choice you made, this is where you should run with it. No.
Hmm.
And that's where I'm at. If like the Chloe Cole that I mentioned in that article, who she told her parents at 12 that she want she she was considering changing her gender. They immediately from 13 to 15 put her on puberty blockers, and then put had her she had her breasts removed, and then a year later she decided that's not what she wanted to do. Who's responsible for harming her because she was harmed? And
Yeah.
so
So
that's the
did
thing.
they go so far as to do the whole sex change?
I think she just had her breast removed. I don't know. I don't think she went further than that. But her issue, because she talks about wanting to have children in the future, is
She got
not
breastfeed.
understanding the puberty blockers and the impact that they may have on her ability to bear children in the future.
Wow. And even also now, she can't even breastfeed even if she wanted to.
Right. Right.
Um, see, I, I think that, you know, 18, 21, there should be an age requirement for you to get to, because you're not thinking necessarily complete at that age. I know that, I guess, if you know, if you're 15 and you've been, if your whole life up to 15 has been encouragement to feel the way that you feel, and be the way that you are, and all the other things pushed upon you so that it stayed encouraging, your brain ain't thinking. So I think that maybe instead of wasting our time addressing, and to be so specific on sexual orientation and stuff like that, look, educate, give the basics, because sex is something we shouldn't even really be talking about to that extreme in school. Um, yes, there needs to be awareness that there are different people by all means, but we don't need to be that explicit. What we need to do is teach, um, maybe more acceptance and less bullying, and crack down on the bully. Like, excuse me, little Johnny, that isn't appropriate for you to tell somebody that it's not okay to be bi, or it's not okay to be gay, or little Johnny, it's not okay for you to hit somebody because they are.
Mm-hmm.
That makes more sense, because now you're taking your views and inciting violence or doing violence on somebody else's views.
Right.
So that's where I can understand, but it's just the reverse. Wait, now, because these are your views, I have to waste my money educating my child about your views, when I want my child to be educated on what will make him more successful in life.
Mm-hmm.
His sexual orientation isn't going to impact his how successful he becomes in life, unless being a certain sexual orientation gets paid more, and that's not the case. At least it shouldn't be. So, can we just stay focused on, you know economics, because children need to know how to write checks, pay bills. The things that we have to do in everyday life should be part of the curriculum of education. Sex, fornication is not something that we need to even be discussing, because honestly, we're not even supposed to be having sex till we get married. It just has gotten so comfortable that, hey, let's just jump over each other's bones until we find the one that we want to. I was thinking to myself, I saw a picture today, um, of this couple that I knew in high school, and they've been together since high school, right? I'm like, damn, I'm, you know, the age I am, and they've been together since high school, and they were each other's first. And I'm thinking, at least from my perspective, how how can I put this nicely? They've only had each other, so they have no idea what anything else is like. So their urges to be out there, to be thinking and being so whatever, maybe that is the reason why all this extra stuff came into play, is because at such an early age, people were allowed to experiment with so many different things and be corrupted by so many different personalities, that now it's acceptable. I
Yeah.
mean, think about it.
Comparison is killing us. And so, some of these people that maybe they've been together for 50, 60 years and they were there first, they have nothing necessarily to compare to. And that could be a good thing, because it's when we start, because then it's like, even like with addiction, to go to a total extreme, it's like that they talk about that first high that you have will never be the same. And so, an addict is forever trying to get back to that very first high, and it's not going to happen. And so, this idea that we are looking for something more, better, whatever it is, or this, or same that we felt at one given point in time, uh, it it's not reality. I mean, it's a delusion, and just saying in respect that we try so hard to compete with each other or compare with one another, and there's just too many options out there, that getting back, there's something to be said for getting back to simple, and not necessarily wanting just constantly more, more, more. It's just never enough.
Mm-hmm.
I think social media is feeding, this idea, and then like the social media in of itself is a filter of reality, because not everybody is putting their everyday life out there, on
Mm-hmm.
social media. It's what they want people to see, or what they want a perception to be. It's not the reality of every day. It's just
Yeah.
glimpses.
you know, uh, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, has society went so far that there is no comeback?
As long as people stop, silence is compliance. If we don't start speaking up against some of this stuff, then we are at a point of no return. But I think the more people that start speaking up, and it's not even necessarily speaking against something, just speaking up for their, interpretation or their take, to be able to have discussions. That's what's going to bring us together versus further dividing us. This constant trying to keep people separate or creating new categories for people to divide over is ridiculous. We need to start having discussions. And it'd be nice to start seeing some people in the audience ask us questions that we could tackle.
Yeah. Yeah, if you got something to say, please uh email me. If you're
Hmm.
scared to say something now, you could always email us, and we will get back to you. We want to know what everybody's got to say. We want to know if we're going in the right direction. I mean, are we the only two people out here? Are we the nuts, or are you guys the nuts, or are they the nuts? We I mean, we're just bringing conversation. We want people to think outside the box, think deeper. What is the things that drive you
Hmm.
to be what you are, what you want to be? You know, our can do our parents influence us to be the sexual orientation that we have? I mean, if you have two men or two women that are together and they call themselves a couple, a family, and they adopt a child, does that mean that that child too will also want to be with somebody of their same sexual orientation? Or will they have free will? Or is those parents' will pushed upon them just based on in the immersion, being immersed in that family environment? I mean, where does it begin? Where does it end? Who has the control? Um, because I mean, the only reason I say that, 'cause this is just talk. I'm just opening up the door for people to even talk about it. Because if we say that marriage is not only between a man and a woman, now it's between a man and a man and a woman and a woman. Um, we can have family. You could adopt. You could do all that. We are doing all of that. But where does at some point that child's rights come into play? I wasn't born by two men or two women. I was born by a man and a woman, but I'm being raised by two men or two women who interact a certain way that maybe the child is feeling uncomfortable but can't express it. So where do their rights start and begin or end? That's where all of this LGBTQ stuff comes into play to me. Where, hey man, so where does it begin? Where does it end? You said ask a good question. There's my question for you, Sensible Chery. how, how does that work?
That takes more than just the two of us to answer.
You know, because
But I think that is an excellent question. Where, when does it begin? Um, and that goes back to, and other things when it comes to life, like when does life begin? At what point does a child have rights? Does it start at all
right,
in the womb? Not necessarily by today's standards, but
you
should
know,
it?
it is crazy, but it just depends on where you're at. In the Asian culture, your birthday is day of conception,
Hmm.
because that's the day you were truly born. You have life at the day of conception. It may not be the kind of life that we can actually speak to each other. I can move around with arms and legs and limbs, but there is life in creation. There is life happening. So
Mhm.
does life start there? How do we truly know if that life feels pain, even when it's first in conception?
Mhm.
Because that life isn't far enough developed to be able to express it to us. So, I mean, how deep do we really want to get with that?
Right.
I just say that, once there's a heartbeat and you see arms and legs, I mean, you can't get any more life than that. Maybe they're not thinking the same things that we're thinking because they are, a baby is truly innocent. We see that in the experiments of hatred. When you take a black child and a white child, I don't care if you took they're just walking age. They're not really talking, just walking age. If you take a white child and a black child, you put them in a room together, and the black child is, let's just say, Black Panther Party, the white child is KKK, you put them in the room, they're not going to stay on opposite ends of the room. They're going to play together, they're going to have a great time, and they're going to interact like they don't have any cares in the world. It's it's the fact that idiots, both sides, to quote a former president, there are great people on both sides. It's what we're teaching our children that is the problem. Where can their rights come in? Should a child be able to sue their parents for saying, "Look, all my life you were a bigot, either way, black, white, whatever, just for sake of argument. I want to sue you for the life you gave me because you taught me that being this way was wrong or right." Should that be a thing?
Oh, I'm
I
sure it
mean,
is.
it may be. I mean, just like what is ridiculous to me, what's that singer, oops, they did it again. What's her
Britney
name?
Spears. Britney
Who?
Spears.
Britney Spears. Why is she having to fight her father over her own money?
Mhm.
She's grown. This isn't an 18-year-old. She's not even 28. She's way older, and she can't even have control of her own money. That's why the woman is crazy, because I would be crazy too if I had all this money and I can't do it what I please with my own money.
Well, and that go I mean, it's just like I know I've read some of the stories. She's had a lot go on in her life. And when you talk about being impressionable and influencing at a young age, there was definitely some influences in her life at a young age
Oh
that
yeah.
have impacted um, her outcome.
Oh man. I mean, I met a
Mhm.
lot of child stars, different, the different strokes cast. I met a few of them. Uh, the things that the two Corys, Corey Feldman and Corey Haynes, when I hung out with them, I can see the confusion that they had looking back on it,
Mhm.
just the life that they had. I mean, I'm sure they have real deep stories. I don't,
Mhm.
if only one person said, "Oh, I've been molested in the entertainment industry," I could chalk it up as, that's just one person uh, acting out. But when you have groups and groups of child stars and stars in general saying that, yeah, there's a lot of that molestation
Mhm.
and stuff going on, maybe that needs to be addressed. I
Right.
mean, I don't know. Look, now we get into a whole different subject, but for me,
Yeah, you're
like I
starting to
said,
talk about Epstein Island now.
you know,
Leave it in.
yeah, let's back up off of that because I know that I don't
Uh,
even want to get into that cup of tea right now. But
yeah, and we probably gotta go wrap it up.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, at the end of the day, knowledge is key, and we definitely need to have interaction. There needs to be
Yes.
dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that um, the government needs to back up just a smidget. And if we want society to be successful, um, we can't have so much control being done because it's going to definitely create a lot of friction.
Mm-hmm.
The more control that one side has, the more pushback you're going to have with the other side.
Right.
If you have something in closing you want to say, speak now or forever hold your peace.
No, I think right now, next week will be interesting. The first petition that I put through, the deadline is tomorrow for the state to respond. So I'll definitely want to talk about that. That was on masks,
Okay,
mandatory masks in school versus optional. So it'll be interesting to see where that panned out.
right on. Well, everybody out there, uh, the woman right there, that's Sensible Chery. And if you don't agree with her, I need you to reach out to me so I can express to her what your concerns are, and maybe she can enlighten you a little bit more on her point of view, and maybe you'll see it her way, or maybe she'll see it your way.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I'm just being that um, other angel on your shoulder, whether or not I'm the good angel or bad angel. Only you, as shit talking Sunday fans, can be the judge. Um, Man, this was a deep. It seems like when it comes to kids, we could talk about so many different things. So
Mm-hmm.
if you want to know more, you better tune in because Sensible Chery, AG the dad, shit talking is definitely a positive thing because right now you see we're teaching you how to think outside the box and to think a little deeper. So until next week, stop being so bossy. Don't hate on the little things, discipline the big things, the things that will get somebody hurt. If them spilling a glass of milk is what you're going to trip off of, then you got problems. Accidents happen, and that's why they're called accidents. But if somebody goes out and beats the shit out of somebody, that's not an accident. That's where you need to discipline. All right. So, I'm AG the dad. Shit Talking Sundays. This is Shit Talking with Sensible Chery. Say goodbye.
Bye.
All right, y'all. Be safe. Think outside the box and think deeper. Peace.
Sunday morning drama is calling up my mama. Drama.
Goes out to all the mothers out there.
And we just wanted you to know
I'm thankful for you. For all the times you whipped my ass just to keep me in line. I'm thankful for you.
everything you've done and you do just to keep me standing on two.
I'm thankful for you. Cause you stand so strong and have my back even though I'm wrong. I'm thankful for you.
And without you I'd be a mess, man, or nothing at all.
Let me start by saying Sarangayo, I don't say these words enough, I'm just letting you know. I hope you understand that it took me to grow before I could understand your love was more than a show. Growing up now, I got kids of my own. I could see the difficulties raising me all alone. Throughout the years, we had our good and our bad, but you always came to the rescue all the times I made you mad. Depressed or even sad, I'm thinking it's just a fad. I apologize for it all, you're all I ever had. I'm thankful you gave me birth, I'm thankful for all you give. I'm thankful for the fact you love me and you love my kids. I'm thankful for what you taught me, I'm thankful for the Most High. I'm thankful we can talk and finally see eye to eye. I'm thankful you raised me strong, I'm thankful you raised me right. But most important, I'm thankful to have you in my life. I'm thankful for you. For all the times you whipped my ass just to keep me in line. I'm thankful for you.
Everything you've done and you do just to keep me standing on two.
I'm thankful for you. Cause you stand so strong and have my back even though I'm wrong. I'm thankful for you.
And without you I'd be a mess, man, or nothing at all. We didn't have a pot to piss in but kept food in the kitchen. Hard-headed and wouldn't listen, that's why you were always bitching. Couldn't see the bigger picture, thought you relied too much on scriptures. Only now I'm realizing you can't take none of this with you. Working 2 9 to 5s, fighting just to survive. Walking a straight line while I waste potential and time. Calling that mess a grind, I was just rotting my mind. Thinking about it, crying, how could I be so blind? A blessing, that's what you are to have carried us all so far. I'm thanking you from my heart for bearing all of those scars. I'm telling you from the start, you never tore us apart. You never left us to suffer. The reason I craft this art, the reason I got this smile, the reason I got this game, the reason I got this style, the reason I'll never change is you. Cause without you I could never be the same. And that's the main reason why I would never quit saying